A psycho father claps his daughter every night, and she suicided to leave the life of abuse. The story begins with a man named David arriving in his town by ferry, carrying the weight of a dark past. He heads home where memories of his daughter, Masha, haunt him. David calls out for her, his voice echoing through the house, but there's no response. Climbing the stairs, he's met with a sight that shatters his soul. Masha, lying in the bathtub, her wrist slit, her face bears bruises, evidence of violence. The source of those marks remains a chilling mystery. David wakes up abruptly from this recurring nightmare, drenched in sweat. It has been 4 months since Masha's tragic death, yet her spirit lingers in the house. Haunted and grief-stricken, David attends a support group for people to relieve his heart. These gatherings are meant to offer solace, but David finds it hard to open up. When he does share his story, he reveals that his wife, Michelle, left him a month after Masha's death. Unable to live with the grief, David once brought a Ouija board home, hoping to connect with Masha's spirit, but fear kept him from using it. Dr. Derek, a group leader, advises him to let go of the past, but David finds it impossible. His guilt over being an absent father consumes him. In the group, 4 peculiar women giggle as David recounts his tragic tale. If giggling during someone's grief story were an Olympic sport, these ladies would win gold. Their behavior unsettles David. Later, the women approach David, claiming Masha's spirit is trying to communicate with him. She shocks David by mentioning Masha's name, something he hasn't shared with anyone. Skeptical, David refuses their invitation to their place for calling her and returns home, memories of Masha's final moments flooding his mind. At home, David's unease deepens. He hears strange noises from Masha's room. Investigating, he finds her diary, filled with disturbing drawings, including a crying girl and a photo of Masha with 4 other girls, faces scratched out. David notices one of the scratched faces resembles one of the strange women from the group. He feels Masha's presence, her spirit lurking nearby. Reading the diary, David learns Masha was plagued by unexplainable events. Isolated and terrified, she kept these fears to herself. The diary hints at the darkness that drove her to despair. That night, David dreams of Masha again. Her spirit appears before him, but when he wakes, the room is empty. The next day at work, still consumed by the diary's contents, he calls Masha's friend, Cassie, seeking answers. Cassie shares that Masha was withdrawn and troubled, but doesn't recognize the girls in the scratched-out photo. David grows more anxious, plagued by guilt. He returns to the support group, where the mysterious women reappear, their smiles unnerving. They offer once more to help him contact Masha's spirit. This time, they insist they don't need his address. They already know where he lives. GPS? Nah. These ladies have ESP. Later, the women materialize outside David's house, shrouded in smoke. Inside, they sense an otherworldly presence. One of them picks up Masha's diary, despite David's protests. Michelle arrives during this strange scene, misunderstanding the situation and leaving after David explains. She warns him to take care of himself before departing. The women press David to visit their place, claiming only there can they reach Masha's spirit. They request Masha's belongings and diary, emphasizing the urgency. Although reluctant, David agrees after they appeal to his love for his daughter. Strangely, when David asks for their address, they say he'll find the way when he's ready. After the women leave, David, in frustration, tears up Masha's diary. That night, he dreams again of Masha's scream, waking to find himself clutching the photo from her belongings. In it, the 4 girls' faces are no longer scratched. They are the faces of the women from the group. Shaken, David invites Michelle over, desperate to share what he's experiencing. Michelle listens but grows increasingly concerned for his mental health. When David moves to kiss her, she recoils, realizing she can no longer stay. Nothing says romance like a haunted Ouija board and ghost stories. David's dreams escalate. In one, Masha whispers secrets in his ear, enraging Michelle, who begins laughing like a doll. David wakes in terror. The next day, he sees strange, faceless figures in oversized costumes near his office. Cassie calls, revealing she's also having nightmares since speaking with him. She recalls Masha attending a self-help group, but the call abruptly disconnects. Just then, Cassie encounters the same faceless figures in her home, and David continues to experience supernatural events. That night, his Ouija board lights up ominously. One of the women from the group appears in his home, her face covered by a red cloth, her body tattooed with cryptic symbols. She instructs him to bring Masha's belongings, and David finds himself at their lair. The women, now clad in red veils and nothing else, perform a ritual to summon Masha's spirit. Apparently, the dress code for summoning spirits is creepy chic. They chant incantations, asking David for Masha's clothes and diary. The ritual grows chaotic as visions of Masha's death flash before David's eyes. The women collapse, screaming, overwhelmed by the ritual's power. When David examines the items, the torn diary transforms into the photo of the girls, now unmistakably the 4 women. Realizing their connection to Masha's torment, David flees home. Calling Michelle in a panic, he recounts everything. She listens but believes David's grief is driving him to madness. David's nightmarish journey continued as he found himself entangled in a horrifying web of guilt, dreams, and sinister rituals. His torment started with another bizarre dream. In this one, a string was tied tightly to his hand, causing him excruciating pain. The string led him to Masha's room, where he found her lying motionless in the same tragic condition as when she had died. Masha, with an eerie intensity, demanded he retrieve her diary. Confused and terrified, David watched as Masha's voice escalated into a chilling scream, jolting him awake. Shaken, David stepped outside his house to clear his head, only to spot 3 ominous figures dressed in red robes standing at a distance. These men appeared to belong to some cult. Despite their unnerving presence, David, now sleep-deprived and overwhelmed, resolved to continue with his day. At work the next morning, David's boss informed him of 4 strange women outside the building, asking for him. Assuming he wasn't in the office due to the lights being off, the women eventually left. But the mention of 4 women struck a nerve. These had to be the same cult members from the ritual he'd stumbled upon. Consumed by paranoia, David rushed outside, hoping to confront them, but found no one. Desperate for answers, he descended into the basement where his group of friends used to meet. Before heading there, he called Michelle, his estranged wife, attempting to mend their fractured relationship. Michelle blamed him for Masha's death, a sentiment David couldn't shake. As night fell and loneliness enveloped him, David tried to replicate the ritual he'd witnessed. Lighting a lamp and reciting the same incantations, he felt an unbearable pain in his head and collapsed. When he awoke, he heard Masha's voice calling to him. Overwhelmed with emotion, David stepped outside and saw Masha standing there, alive, and claiming she fell from the sky. Ignoring every logical thought, David brought her inside immediately. Dirty from her journey, David led Masha to the basement bathroom to clean up. However, something disturbing happened. David found himself watching her change clothes. This unsettling behavior hinted at darker truths lurking beneath his surface. Once Masha was dressed, David suggested taking her to Michal's house, but Masha objected. Meanwhile, the hooded cultists reappeared outside, their presence intensifying the tension. In an effort to normalize the situation, David prepared jam and bread for Masha in the dining area. During their conversation, Masha's tone turned unsettling. She reminded him how they'd thought she was dead and touched her belongings, which seemed to disturb her deeply. Suddenly, Masha's behavior became erratic. She kept bringing up Michal, prompting David to call her. But when Michal answered, her voice transformed into a demonic laugh, chilling David to his core. Outside, the hooded men were now inside the building, slowly advancing. Masha's questions became more probing and haunting. She asked David if she had been a good daughter and if their relationship had been good. Hesitant, but trying to reassure her, David said yes. But then, Masha's questions turned accusatory. She demanded to know why, if he was a good father, she'd felt compelled to take her own life. David, unable to face the truth, tried to deflect her. As they prepared to leave the building, Masha's behavior became even stranger. Her cryptic comments hinted at the abuse she had endured. It was revealed that David, far from the loving father he portrayed, had a twisted and abusive relationship with his daughter. The signs had been there all along: his inappropriate behavior, his fixation on her undergarments, and the disturbing dreams where he watched her. Unable to handle the confrontation, David dragged Masha outside, but the red-robed men blocked their path. Panicking, Masha slipped from his grasp and darted back inside, giggling as she invited him to play hide-and-seek. Desperately searching for her, David's world unraveled further. Masha struck him from behind with a glass bottle and fled. Chasing her, David confronted the hooded figures and angrily pulled the hood off one of them, only to discover a monstrous demon beneath. Terrified, David realized he was no longer in the real world. The ritual had transported him to a twisted, otherworldly dimension. Masha's taunts echoed through the space as she continued to evade him. When she finally appeared, she attacked him with a knife, stabbing him in the stomach. David managed to kick her away and took refuge in the restroom. Masha, however, was relentless, stalking him through the building. At one point, thinking the coast was clear, David tried to escape, but Masha ambushed him again. David's attempts to avoid Masha were about as successful as trying to microwave a burrito with a foil still on. Disaster was inevitable. In a brutal confrontation, David punched Masha in the face and the two collapsed to the ground. But Masha's behavior shifted. She began crying and revealed the ultimate truth. She was not Masha, but a vengeful entity sent to punish him for his horrific deeds. The real Masha had taken her own life because of his abuse, and this spirit was here to ensure he paid the ultimate price. In a terrifying attack, the demonic entity bit into David's neck. Though gravely injured, David managed to grab a knife and stab the entity, temporarily stopping it. However, his relief was short-lived as the four witches and the hooded cultists entered the room. They restrained David, laying him on the ground. One of the witches removed her robe, and in a horrifying ritual, bit into David's stomach, creating a gaping wound. From the wound emerged a grotesque, monstrous version of Masha, the culmination of the witch's dark magic. If David thought family therapy was awkward, he was in for a whole new level of uncomfortable. The witches crowned the resurrected Masha as one of their own, a leader in their demonic cult. She declared, "I fell from the sky," symbolizing her transformation and rebirth as part of the witch's realm. The Kano demon whom the cult worshipped had granted her life anew to carry out her vengeance. Now, Masha's soul inhabited David's body, ensuring her abuser's eternal torment. It became evident that the entire sequence of events had unfolded in a liminal space, a realm between the living world and the afterlife. David's spirit had been trapped here, forced to confront his sins. The witches, using their dark powers, had orchestrated this punishment to give Masha the justice she deserved. As the ritual concluded, the witches left with their new leader, leaving David's spirit to languish in eternal agony. If you like this movie, then don't forget to subscribe the channel.